The sacred mountain in Native American legends turns out to be a lair of evil spirits. All climbers, after getting close, will be affected by the demonic sounds, and die in various bizarre ways. Time goes back to an autumn night in 1959, in British Columbia, Canada. A cliff towers into the clouds. However, this mountain doesn't give people a feeling of grandeur and majesty, but rather a sense of eerie horror. At the top of the cliff, a climber named Jack is dragging his injured leg, crawling slowly in towards the foot of the mountain, but just then, strange echoes suddenly ring out all around. Jack seems to have seen something terrifying, and his heart rate accelerates instantly. Jack hurriedly picks a nearby rock to secure the rope to, then, ignoring the wound on his leg, he slides down along the rope, as if a moment's pause would lead to something terrifying. But the strange occurrences do not leave Jack alone. Just as he slides down to the middle, it seems that something pulls his rope away from above. Jack is trapped halfway up the mountain, his body hanging in the air. Unable to move away, Jack falls into despair. And finally, the fear of the weirdness at the top of the mountain overcomes the fear of death. Jack lets go of the last section of the climbing rope. Not long after, this incident attracted the attention of the higher-ups. In an office in Washington at this time, a female secretary is reporting this tragedy that happened on the Indian sacred mountain, to a high-ranking government official. From their conversation, it is learned that the entire professional climbing team, including Jack, all died on that mountain due to various accidents. Just then, the phone next to the high-ranking official suddenly rings, and it turns out to be a call from the president. The president also attaches great importance to this matter, and the high-ranking official reports the current situation to the president. He suspects that there is a mysterious supernatural force on that mountain. However, after the climbers died, the mountain has been blocked by the local Indian tribe. They have a very tough attitude, strictly prohibiting anyone from entering. After listening to the high-ranking official's report, then she orders the government official to continue monitoring the area until the Indians are willing to open it up. Time flies like an arrow. More than 60 years have passed since the tragedy of Jack's team. However, today, they suddenly lifted the blockade. The government then hired a professional team to go rock climbing on the sacred mountain, and Colton's team was the invited one. Among them, the most skilled is the team leader Colton. The cliffs that make ordinary people dizzy seem like flat ground to Colton. Most people in the team believe that, as long as the captain is there, no cliff can stop them. Only their teammate Ian is a bit absent-minded, because his grandfather was Jack, who died on the Indian sacred mountain more than 60 years ago, so he knows well how strange that mountain is. Ian hopes that they can think it over. However, Mary, a teammate in the team, says that they have accepted the employment from the Washington government department, so it's impossible to give up. Helplessly, Ian returns home, and while packing his luggage, he asks his father if there are any clues left by his grandfather to prevent some unpredictable dangers during the climb. When his father learns that Ian is also going to climb that mountain, he immediately expresses strong opposition. According to Ian's father, that place is an evil land, which will keep taking the lives of every climber. Ian's grandfather died because of that, and his father hopes that his son can give up, as he doesn't want to lose another family member. But the team has already accepted the government's task, and it's impossible to give up because of a few words. Ian can't just sit by and watch his teammates have an accident, so he still refuses his father's suggestion, insisting on climbing to the top of that mountain with his teammates to find out the truth. To reassure his father, Ian promises his father that he will return safely. Seeing his son so persistent, his father can only sigh helplessly, and then says no more, letting his son leave. Not long after, Colton's team of 10 people pack their luggage, ready to go to the Indian sacred mountain. After a long journey, they arrive at the foot of the Indian sacred mountain. At the first sight of this mountain, they are completely shocked, because this mountain is as if cut by a knife, with smooth cliffs reaching straight into the sky. Everyone feels the difficulty of this task even before starting. Colton immediately holds an on-site meeting to arrange the tasks for this climbing operation. He divides the team into 2 parts, among which Colton leads 5 members as the climbing team to carry out the mountain climbing project, while Ian is assigned to the 4-person logistics team led by Mary, mainly responsible for communication and other logistics tasks. Hearing that he can't climb the mountain, Ian can't help but feel a little lost, but he still follows Colton's requirements, staying behind to take charge of various logistics-related tasks. Colton had just assigned everyone's tasks, when an old man suddenly approached them. Through Colton's introduction, they learned that he was the chief of the Indian tribe in charge of this area. It was he who proposed the unsealing of the holy mountain this time. After the Indian chief appeared, he only said a few simple words to encourage everyone, and then began to explain the precautions during the climb. The most important thing was to protect the Indians' sacred mountain, so he asked everyone not to drive steel nails into the mountain. After saying that, he didn't give them a chance to refute and left directly. After a simple rest for the night, Colton led 5 team members to climb the mysterious sacred mountain, because the rock walls here are extremely steep, almost perpendicular to the ground, and in addition to the prohibition of driving steel nails into the mountain, their climbing speed was very slow. They spent a whole day and only climbed less than half the distance. It was getting dark by then, so they had to stop to rest temporarily. Fortunately, they could find cracks in the mountain to hang hammocks, so that they could camp in the air. Halfway up the rock wall, after today's attempt, they all knew very well that this was indeed an extraordinary challenge. However, they didn't back down, but became even more excited. At the same time, at the foot of the sacred mountain, while Ian, who was in charge of logistics, was walking in the woods, he unexpectedly met that chief. To be precise, it was the chief who took the initiative to find Ian walking in the woods. The other party seemed to know Ian's identity very well, so she got straight to the point and said, he came for the matter of Ian's grandfather more than 60 years ago. Hearing this, Ian immediately became alert, wondering why the chief suddenly told her this. The chief didn't seem to notice Ian's vigilance. He just kept talking to herself, hoping that Ian could fulfill his grandfather's last wish. Just as Ian was a little curious, wondering what his grandfather's last wish was, the old chief suddenly began to tell the stories in their tribe's legends. In the ancient legends of the Indians, an evil being lurks on the sacred mountain. This evil thing suddenly came here hundreds of years ago. After that evil spirit appeared, the entire Indian tribe fell into madness, and a large number of tribesmen died tragically due to various strange events. It wasn't until later that 2 warriors in the tribe sealed the evil thing on the top of the mountain, thus sparing future generations from disasters. The old chief's story was fascinating, but Ian was confused after hearing it. He didn't understand how this was related to his grandfather. The old chief continued to talk. It turned out that the seal set back then wasn't permanent. As long as 2 people climbed to the top of the mountain together, they can lift the seal of the evil spirit. And more than 60 years ago, Ian's grandfather Jack climbed to the top with another person, causing the seal of that evil spirit to loosen. After Jack discovered this, he chose to flee, so the seal of the evil spirit, though loosened, wasn't completely broken. But when he left, the evil spirit tried to use its powerful force to bewitch Jack into returning to the top. In order to prevent the evil spirit from breaking through the seal, Jack finally chose to sacrifice himself. After that, the Indian tribe blocked the sacred mountain for 60 years, just not wanting anyone else to enter the top, which would cause the evil spirit to break through the seal. However, due to the continuous pressure from the government, so not long ago, the Indian tribe had to lift the blockade of the sacred mountain. Ian was stunned by this bizarre story. If things were really as the chief said, then Ian's task was to stop his companions from climbing the mountain. However, he knew very well that he couldn't persuade his companions to change their minds. Of course, if Colton and others still reached the top and released the evil spirit in the end, the chief also has a backup plan. He took out a strange-looking object, and the chief claimed that it was a sacred artifact of the tribe, which could restrain that evil spirit. After explaining this, he turned around and left directly. As he walked, the chief also urged Ian to stay calm after encountering the evil spirit. The chief's words made Ian's heart heavier, but those companions on the top of the mountain still didn't know that danger was imminent. They couldn't sleep all night because of this intense challenge, and started the next day's climbing action early. Not long after they set off, they met the manager, and a strange sound echoed in everyone's mind. Under the influence of this sound, they could hardly continue climbing. Obviously, this is the sound emitted by the evil spirit mentioned by the chief, trying to control Colton and others in this way. Just when everyone couldn't move forward because of this strange sound, team leader Colton actually forced herself to calm down, and then she broke free from the evil spirit's control. Not long after, the sound in other people's minds also gradually disappeared. After this strange incident, the others began to hesitate, but Colton didn't think it was a problem, and he kept encouraging her teammates to continue climbing upwards. However, what they didn't know was that the real nightmare had just begun. Just when the several people on the mountain all stopped, because of the evil spirit's voice, strange phenomena also appeared at the foot of the mountain. Suddenly, all the radios were interfered with. Mary and others couldn't get in touch with Colton. Teammate David tried to repair the radio, but to no avail, so he could only propose adding a signal amplifier to the radio. At this moment, Ian just returned to the camp. Hearing the abnormal changes on the mountain, he immediately recalled what the chief had said before. Ian told these bizarre stories to Mary and others, hoping that Colton and others would return immediately and stop this climbing operation. Although Mary didn't believe those bizarre legends, she still agreed to the request to terminate this climbing operation, because team leader Colton was her fiancé. Mary's worry for her lover had exceeded her concern for interests. That's why she didn't hesitate to give up this government project. At the same time, on the climbing team's side, because of the strange sound before, so that everyone's bodies began to show some unusual changes, Colton, who was highly skilled on weekdays, now moved extremely slowly, even not as good as ordinary team members. Shortly after, Colton began to feel dizzy, and couldn't adapt to high-intensity climbing, but Colton stubbornly continued to climb upwards, because at this time, they were no longer far from the top of the mountain. However, the changes in the other members of the team were more intense. One of the team members, Irene, found that her teammate Brad suddenly disappeared from above, which startled her. Irene kept calling Brad's name in fear, but got no response. After learning about this situation, Colton felt a little uneasy, but he didn't show it. He just comforted Irene through the walkie-talkie to stay calm. At this moment, Brad's traction rope suddenly fell beside Irene, and then, more equipment fell beside Irene. Seeing this strange situation, Irene couldn't help but feel at a loss. She instinctively looked at the place where things fell, but saw an extremely terrifying scene. Irene's screams echoed through the mountains, so much so that Mary and others at the foot of the mountain could hear it clearly. They realized that something unexpected had happened on the mountain, and at this moment, Mary's worry for her lover reached its peak. She kept calling Colton's name over the radio, trying to find out what was happening there, but due to the evil spirit's interference, Colton's side couldn't receive any information. Colton heard Irene scream and looked towards the source of the sound, and thus saw her companion Brad, who, without any protective measures, was climbing backwards on the rock wall, and even bit off Irene's safety rope. His ferocious appearance wasn't at all human-like. His eyes filled with resentment, as if he wanted to kill Irene. However, in just a moment, Brad actually regained his sanity again, losing the control of the strange power. He was immediately suppressed by physics, falling straight down from the cliff. Mary and others at the foot of the mountain didn't know what was happening above, only occasionally hearing some cries for help and exclamations, but this still made her terrified. On the mountain at this time, after experiencing some strange changes, Irene was already somewhat mentally broken, and she couldn't stop crying, and her cries were also heard by Mary and others at the foot of the mountain. Mary kept trying to call Irene, but it had no effect. Up to now, Mary could no longer stay calm. Worried that before something worse happened, she still couldn't get in touch with Colton and others. Mary decided to send someone to catch up, and let Colton and them stop the climbing operation. After hesitating for a moment, she chose Ian and another companion, Mike. After receiving the order, Ian and Mike didn't hesitate, picked up their equipment and prepared to climb the cliff. On the other side, after seeing Irene's condition, Colton knew that her current state couldn't continue climbing at all, so she briefly comforted her over the walkie-talkie, and then ordered Irene to wait in place for the subsequent rescue. At the same time, Ian and Mike, under Mary's guidance, kept climbing upward along the route Brad and Irene had taken. On the way, Mike was accidentally injured. In this case, Ian had to ask him to stay where he was for the time being, and later Mary would pick him up and take him back to the camp. While Ian continued climbing alone, Mary agreed to Ian's proposal, but Mike was worried whether Ian could find Irene. Fortunately, Irene had made many marks with chalk along the way, and with these, Ian could barely find Irene. Only then did Mike feel relieved. Not long after, Mary was about to set off to pick up Mike, when she was stopped by the Indian chief. The chief, not long before, had found Brad's body and brought his helmet, which was equipped with a camera. This might allow Mary and others to find out what had happened on the mountain earlier. Mary asked David to analyze the footage from the camera, while she went to rescue Mike. In the meantime, Ian had already reached the area near where Irene was trapped, but just then, the evil spirit began to release sound wave attacks on them again. Ian immediately recalled the old chief's advice, constantly telling himself to stay calm. Gradually, the strange sound disappeared, and the interfered radio could also work normally. Ian finally got in touch with team leader Colton and the others, learned about Irene's current situation. Ian quickly said he would go to meet Irene, and then proposed to the leader to stop the project. However, the other party was already close to the top of the mountain by then, so they had no intention of giving up like this. Helplessly, Ian had to first meet up with Irene and then discuss matters further. By the time he found Irene, it was already evening, so the two didn't act recklessly, but set up a hanging tent on the cliff to rest for the night. During this time, another accident occurred. Among the few people near the top, an Asian teammate, Liang, found that his companion Emily was missing. He realized something was wrong, and hurried out of the hanging tent to check, only to find that Emily, like Brad in the daytime, had been controlled by that mysterious force. Emily kept growling in a low voice. Compared to humans, she looked more like a beast at this moment. The noise from Liang's side alarmed other companions not far away. When Colton came out to check, the light on his body directly attracted the controlled Emily, who climbed towards Colton as easily as walking on flat ground. However, just for a moment, that mysterious force disappeared again. In the darkness, Emily's scream was heard. After this incident, Ian couldn't help but suspect that maybe the evil spirit hadn't been fully released, so it couldn't fully control them, so after a period of time, they would fall due to losing strength. But even so, the sudden mutation of their companions still panicked everyone, especially those like Liang who were nearby. After Emily's incident, some companions began to believe what Ian said, and decided not to climb anymore, except for team leader Colton. The rest decided to go down the mountain at dawn. So, when the next morning came, only Colton was left near the top climbing alone, and Ian and the other person planned to stop him, so they were also climbing up with Irene. A few hours later, Colton finally reached the top of the mountain. Not long after, Ian and the others also climbed up. However, the scene in front of them shocked Ian directly, because there was a dried-up corpse not far away. Obviously that was the person who climbed up with Ian's grandfather more than 60 years ago, and Colton, who had arrived early, seemed to be controlled by the evil spirit at this time, constantly provoking his former companions with words. Irene was sure that Colton had been controlled by the mysterious force, because his current state was the same as Brad's before. Ian on the side immediately became alert, just as the three were in a confrontation. A stone not far away quietly lit up with a strange red light. The next second, Liang, who had long left, actually rushed to the top of the mountain, and directly knocked Colton unconscious. It turned out that he was the one truly controlled by the evil spirit, and Colton was just venting with foul words. On the way here, Liang had already killed another companion who was going down the mountain. At this time, on this mountain, there was no one else except them, so no one would come to help Ian and them. Just when Liang thought he could easily deal with them, another accident happened. Unexpectedly, Irene, the only female, was a taekwondo master, easily knocking Liang to the ground. Seeing the situation was bad, the evil spirit decisively abandoned Liang, and turned Irene into its puppet instead. At this time, the evil spirit thought it had the situation under control again. In fact, Ian was indeed almost killed by Irene, but he had the Indian sacred artifact on him. The next second, the spirits of two Indian warriors appeared on the top of the mountain. Now it was a 2-on-1 fight. Although Irene was powerful, but facing the spirits of two Indian warriors, she still couldn't defeat them quickly, and Ian seized the opportunity, used that sacred artifact to reinforce the seal on the evil spirit again. The next second, Irene returned to normal again. However, they didn't seem to notice that the unconscious Colton had some unusual changes. The film ends here. The sound was released in June this year. The theme of the film is very novel, combining eerie horror with rock climbing, but it's somewhat unsatisfactory in terms of plot, and the development in the later part is really too erratic. Today's video ends here. Thank you all for watching. Your likes, comments and follows are the best encouragement for us. See you in the next episode.